Can you believe how much of a legacy Mirror's Edge ended up with? Sure, it makes sense that a graphic designer's vision of heaven released during the Brown Age is easy to narrativize. It also happened to contain enough glitches to make a great speedrun game. And then you see artists like Underscores using it as background footage for music performances, random content creators using it as all-purpose B-roll, a kind of high-concept Subway Surfers, and a disproportionate number of games clearly bearing its influence. There's even a joke going around right now about how they should totally make a sequel, which of course, they did. So what went wrong? The quippy answer would be to say that its art direction exceeds while the gameplay is unfocused, but those elements don't exist in isolation. It's a complex piece of work, and the development cycle didn't seem to collapse into any obvious disaster. Anytime a sequel angers fans, there's a handful of easy arguments, none of which seem to work for this one. It wasn't rushed, shipped in a buggy state, or farmed out to some cheaper studio. Many of the same individual developers worked on both, perhaps at the very same desks. The one big red flag is the open world full of copy-pasted missions, which was the style at the time. But if you hate those, they are entirely optional. The linear action-packed story chapters are structured much like the first game. So was it too predictable? Too safe? No. Even the first 10 minutes of each game makes the differences in speed and scale apparent. The running and combat systems have been rebuilt from the ground up with plenty of new mechanics, and the key visual signals have been retained with major expansions and variations on the art direction. So let's really take our time and explore each aspect of Catalyst in good faith to figure out how it ended up in this cultural dead zone. As I record this video, summer has begun, so much like the runners of Mirror's Edge, I am extremely sweaty. If you would be so kind as to press any of the engagement buttons below, leave a comment, or click any of the links in the description to support me, then you can rest easy knowing I will be filming in more humane conditions in the near future. The sound design and music continue to be outstanding, but you'd be forgiven for not noticing because this is one of the most tragic default sound mixes. I know headphones and speakers vary, but I played this game 3 times, barely noticing the music. It wasn't until I cranked the master volume down 50% that I could finally hear it. But we can't place 100% of the blame on these sliders. The music of Mirror's Edge had more bright and sparkly melodies that suited the quiet puzzle areas, because Catalyst has you exploring hub areas for longer stretches of time. Solar Fields made more subtle ambient tracks, which do sound great, but tend to get drowned out by all the ambient noise and the dialogue. More on that later. So naturally, the music hits its stride during the loud moments. The first game had some thumping 808 drums and distorted sounds that suited the chase scenes perfectly, and Catalyst pushed the team to really top themselves. The action set pieces are huge and dramatic without sacrificing the clean, elegant visual style. How many action game levels happen in an art museum? Spider-Man 2? The color design of mostly white with strong accent colors is still here, but the reflective surfaces give you so much more to take in. Adding to the white space with these diffused reverse images just looks great, like some kind of thematically relevant glass thing. Even the shapes alone create tons of intrigue, jumping from crisscrossed beams onto gravity-defying platforms, then seeing the wires that hold everything together is more than enough to scratch that architecture itch. Even the floors are design candy. Subtle patterns, more reflections, mysterious, fully modeled technology. Most architects say that you should build in harmony with the landscape. DICE made details like this just to remind you that this city is antithetical to the landscape. Like, what is this support system? Back when the rooftops were all flat, they looked like normal office buildings. Now they look like these incomprehensible metal creatures with their own biology beyond our understanding. We'll come back to the art direction later, but it's already evident that the game has a visual identity of its own. It's clean and precise, but huge to the point of being uncomfortable, and the gameplay is designed the same way. Combat has been rebuilt from the brutal one-shot interactions to a more complex series of moves that inevitably devolve into pure physical comedy. I argued in my old video that the first game's combat was unintuitive, but once you learned the handful of enemy spawn points in each encounter, they provide just enough speed bumps to make maintaining your momentum feel challenging. Most enemies could be avoided or knocked down instantly once you knew the 3 good moves in your arsenal. In Catalyst, Faith has more mechanics that play off each other dynamically. Sidesteps, slides, and jumps can be combined with punches and kicks for moves that are each individually satisfying. But then you have to use them on the enemies. Look at these guys. It's like their hands and feet are encased in concrete. Everything they do has such agonizing startup. It is funny, and I enjoy that. Not everything has to be cool and serious, but they interact very strangely with your own animations. Let's slow this one down. I move sideways and kick, which knocks him over. But see how he's about to hit me with this blue shockwave, then just kind of freezes? Your attacks make enemies snap back to their standing pose, which not only looks awkward, it encourages you to spam your moves and not pay attention to what's coming at you. It's sad because the physicality of your moves look amazing. They ramp down your movement speed right before each hit to give them extra anticipation. But when you combine that with the motion blur, camera tilting, and enemies stumbling for 2 seconds after each hit, encounters have you spending more time standing still than looking around. About 1/3 of the story chapters lock you into combat arenas like this, which make great use of geometry to encourage more dynamic play. They look kind of like skate parks, but that reveals the flaw. Skating games let you map out a path in front of you, and the environment cooperates. Enemies here will path around the geometry at random angles to catch up with you, so you can't line them up for intentional combos. You end up paying more attention to the level than the characters, just running back and forth between props, stomping on anyone who happens to cross your path. You know what's the worst part? The game has an entire skill tree, and none of it solves this problem. Some of these moves do more damage, some of them stun longer, but the vast majority of these boxes are make the number bigger. But hey, at least the UI is nice. The UI is like everything else in the game. Cohesive look, clever details, and obnoxious choices that clutter the gameplay. The first time you boot up the game, you may notice this giant red line telling you exactly where to go. I respect anyone who disliked the first game because the red highlighted props ruined their sense of discovery, but at least that system left something to the imagination. You can turn it off, but as other critics pointed out, the line was probably implemented for the open world segments, which are so visually dense that finding your way to the next mission is confusing for a first playthrough. But you know what else would have worked? This really nice map. The way it models bridges and other intersections, makes charting your route from A to B easy enough. It even contributes to the world building by emphasizing how the upper classes literally tower over the lower. And the population statistics in the upper thirds there reinforce that sense of creepy surveillance. I recommend playing with the runner vision in classic mode and everything except enemy indicators turned off in the HUD. Wait, is this a contradiction? I said I like the UI, but now I'm saying you should turn most of it off. Part of UI design is non-textual cues, like this blur and the color saturation boost to show when you've hit top speed. And there's actually no point to checking your health bar. You can't heal yourself, so the correct decision is always to run fast and hit people who get in your way. And I like not having to check my health bar when I'm running around in a flow state. It also goes hand in hand with the way they used rumble. A major mechanic in both games is rolling to break your fall. This is technically easy in both games because you can just mash the roll button and you'll land safely every time. But if you get tired of mashing, the first game requires you to just memorize the timing, while the second rumbles the controller right when you need to roll. Yes, that is easier, but it also creates more opportunities. If you jump a short distance, you can land without rolling and keep on running to maintain more momentum. So waiting for the little rumble creates this anticipation, and it makes you appreciate the slight differences in height scattered across each run. Story in the first game was pulp action fun. You got a 2-minute breather between each level about sticking it to the man. Most of the criticism was directed at its zero-budget animation, but the levels themselves, they would only be interrupted by cutscenes for 30 seconds once per level. Little dramatic gestures, seen through first person to help you get your own energy up. So even if the story was nothing to you, it didn't step on the beautiful music and the sound design. Catalyst buries its soundtrack in expositional voiceover and unfortunate attempts at witty banter.
No, sorry, forget I asked. I'm sure you are very busy since you're not saying anything. Kuma says hi, by the way. He seems to like you, and he doesn't like anyone. There's something wrong with his emotional response algorithm, but I can't find the error.
I don't mind cheesy jokes in an action movie, but they never relate to what you're doing. They're always distractions about the backstory and characters who only exist in cutscenes. Compare any of Catalyst's dialogue to the jackknife chase. His little tough guy lines land because he does it while taunting you from inches away. And then you get to see him eat shit in this really painful looking fall, which not only makes it satisfying to catch up to him, but also makes your own platforming feel more dangerous. Much like the chase scene with the sniper is enhanced because it's a claustrophobic corridor and you can hear their shots bounce off the metal walls. Compare that to Catalyst's big chase scene, which happens with a drone. It plays fine, but that claustrophobia and physicality is lost. This thing just goes faster than you through open air until it randomly stops. This feels like one of those studio movie adaptations where they take every single criticism about the source material at face value and correct it by making it more grounded and serious.
So it seems this is your lucky night.
These are games about fighting a dystopian government by jogging. The first time that Faith said, "It's not news anymore, it's advertising," I rolled my eyes at how obvious it was, but then once I learned to enjoy the game, I fully embraced that earnest, sincere cheese. New Faith has a tragic backstory that haunts her nightmares, and I'm okay with that. But it's not like it adds anything to the way she grabs a zip line. It feels like the art team knocked it out of the park with the new character designs, right down to the incidental characters, but the script got punched up excessively. So instead of The Matrix, it's you and your annoying friends complaining about how dumb it is to live in The Matrix. Speaking of cynical choices that trade genuine emotion for broad, gamified appeal, the open world is an impressive piece of work visually. The way everything seamlessly chains together, jumps, vaults, and these new corner swings, results in a modern design freak's answer to movement slop. It also offers a strong implementation of collectibles. If there were no collectibles, I would probably just beeline straight between missions, but seeing a single sparkly thing on the horizon makes me want to climb out of my way. And before I know it, I'm enjoying seeing what I can do with these different props just for fun, which in turn leads to more nice views and quiet moments. Like, this is a cool room, isn't it? Cute little triangle windows. Then I went to the other side of the district, looked at a pretty skyscraper, and only after staring at it for a full minute to get this footage did I connect the dots. How often do you get this sense of scale with art this detailed? Running from the cops is another unexpected highlight. One criticism of open world games from this period is that they tend to feel like flat, featureless landscapes with points of interest sprinkled around. But the city of glass here feels genuinely three-dimensional. There's huge variation in height, and each rooftop has multiple structures stacked in different layers. Where the rooftops in the first game were mostly isolated with gaps to jump over, here we have a massive range of skyways, bridges, rope swings, zip lines, and ramps. Escape sequences are where the game proves it's more complex than the red line suggests. Like in this clip, where I find my own path to safety while being chased by drones, and feel sweet relief when I see this air vent to duck inside. Then a drone somehow hits me through the concrete walls, immediately loses sight of me, and disappears. This game. And that finally brings us to the intersection of gameplay and art direction. How can all of your level designers work on the same area, creating different segments of platforming that come together into a single, believable place? At the Game Developers Conference in 2016, Catalyst's art director, Joni Lundstedt, spoke about the transition from concept art to 3D modeling. The team began by creating new shapes and forms to give the game an identity distinct from the first, and that worked. If you stripped away all the color, you might mistake the first game for a Half-Life 2 mod. Catalyst has geometry so playful and abstract that you could most easily compare it to a more abstract game like Superhot. But it manages these huge spaces while maintaining the impression of human architecture. And that's an exciting way to build an open world game. Anywhere you go, you'll be racking up points and tripping into activities. There's an arcade-like quality to that gameplay loop. Seeing a gritty, realistic city bursting with scoreboards and mini-games can feel weird. That's not a problem here, since the Catalyst developers had no interest in realism. This world is a fantasy of what modernist design freaks could do if they had infinite money and no regulation. Where the first game was bright concrete, this game is dark glass. Where the first game had subtle gradients of color and blending that Catalyst never matches, it replaces that subtlety with sharp patterns and shapes. And that pattern language came from painstaking research. Ljungstedt also spoke about the challenge in transitioning from the concept phase to the layout of the open world map. It was one city that helped the team put it all together. For the first game, the art team cited a wide range of cities as inspirational. The color palette was inspired by the white towns of Andalusia, while the architecture itself pulled from all sorts of industrial nations. With Catalyst, the idea was to make the city feel more dense and interconnected, and a specific quality of Tokyo inspired that layout: layered, contrasting shapes. Concord Plaza, the first major hub in the game, has a few features in common with the iconic Shibuya crossing. Massive traffic intersection with throngs of pedestrians, plain-looking towers jutting upward with wide spaces between them, buildings with flatiron-shaped corners. Then there's the screens full of ads, which are a general part of this game's bad future aesthetic, but this particular area stretches the perspective further out in the distance to exaggerate them. I read one author describe the Shibuya district itself as a conscious creation, a meticulously scripted entity formed through the benevolent rivalry of two private corporations. Yeah, the word benevolent is doing heavy lifting there. That's the kind of dystopia Catalyst is. Like, this is the low-key part of the city. The further you move into the plot, the more overstimulating the materials become. Normal air conditioners are replaced with these neon boxes. But how far did they push this idea? Let's stand on this one rooftop in the Shimmering Heights hub and look around in a circle. First, you can see a nightclub that's long and wide, filled with statement light fixtures. Next to it is a stubby building with staggered railings for you to run across. Then this building has a weird L-shaped window and a stock market crawl. Then finally you see this pair of towers, the tallest and thinnest in the area, with this splash of purple across transparent LED screens and a skyway that acts as a bridge between areas. So each building uses a completely different gimmick to grab your attention. And that's exactly the impression I get when looking at Google Street View of Ginza in Tokyo. Trendy shopping districts come and go, but Ginza certainly still boasts a wide range of buildings that demand attention. So let's do the same thing. Pick a spot and look around. At first glance, a skyway connects these twin shopping malls made of perfectly symmetrical tiles. If you zoom in, you can tell these tiles have especially deep grooves between them, just to create shadows and give it a more stable, grid-like feeling from a distance. That very sturdy, symmetrical shape language continues with these cut-out balconies on the corner, and this descending element on the wall. Even this architectural render I found on the mall's website looks a lot like the Catalyst map render. All these features are big enough to catch your eye from street level without looking too flashy or cheap. The two neighboring jewelry stores push the envelope of tasteful flexing. This one uses a clean glass facade, alternating tall and short windows, and across the street is the polar opposite: opaque, white, with organic shapes for windows. Kind of familiar. The designers of Catalyst clearly enjoyed these contrasts because every district of glass employs different ones to give you a constant stream of impressive views. But what happens when you go indoors? The longer I look at this footage, the more I notice the different field of view angles. Mirror's Edge is locked to a 60-degree FOV, while Catalyst defaults to 70 and goes all the way up to here. I'm always in favor of more customization, but you can see why committing to the horse blinders made sense in context. That limit enabled the first-person cutscenes that connected your character to the small details of the physical world, while Catalyst has you blasting through everywhere like it's Quake. That makes for a less intimate story. The early levels have some grit, some trash lying around, but around the 1 hour mark, you get your first glimpse of the corporate overlords, and everything in their domain is spotless. The amount of glass makes you feel like you're sandwiched in between microscope slides, and the neutral colors are offset by a radioactive green. So even with the dialogue turned off, you know you're in a science lab. The light platforming builds up to this set piece where you ride up an elevator shaft, getting a nice view over everything you just traversed. Then there's a running away sequence where you break through some glass walls and zip line out. Wow, breaking glass looks amazing. Let's try doing it again over here. Oops, not that window. Maybe this one? No. Okay, this mechanic might have gotten lost in the shuffle, but it is very cool this one time. The use of NPCs is also disorienting. Like, you overhear these two office workers having a normal conversation, and it feels out of place. This is an impossible mad science lab where everyone would be dying of vertigo. I wouldn't think about that if their dialogue was more stylized or full of cyberpunk slang, but they sound like normal people, and I hate it. The open world is littered with even more people that shatter the illusion. They stand 10 feet away from you, like stuck in place in a fish tank, never noticing you tapping on the glass. And maybe that could work if they had AR glasses and were jacked into the metaverse, but they're not. The first game also had low poly NPCs in the environment, but they were placed far enough in the distance to avoid the uncanny valley. The interiors avoided them entirely, which only enhanced the vibes. The Pirandello Kruger warehouse is a quiet place. A couple of plain puzzles where you look for a button to push or the right props to climb on. But after several fast-paced exteriors, getting this glimpse inside feels like sneaking a peek into the lives of its inhabitants. Everything might be brilliant and sparkling, but people still rely on sticky notes taped to their monitors. The lack of NPCs is what allows you to think curious thoughts. Catalyst, adding them to stand around gawking, just makes it feel more artificial. Chapter 11 takes place in elevator shafts and server backrooms, but you don't get to see the public side of this place. And at the beginning of this chapter, you can even go inside this lady's apartment, which she is remarkably chill about. So, Catalyst shows no interest in the inner life of its people, but it shows great interest in the life of the city itself. Let's finish by looking at some of the moments in Catalyst that just work. Chapter 5 has the best individual room in the game. It starts with one of these sneaky tutorials that teaches you a mechanic while feeling natural. Then that leads you up to the top of this huge tech company lobby. It perfectly sets you up to have top speed, and then lets you run around this upper landing to see what's below, but not quite everything. Once you work your way down there, you have these cool brutalist sculptures that are perfectly spaced apart for your jumps. They're just big enough that you can keep running and jumping across them without instantly slipping off, and as you get better at the movement, you can navigate them without having to grab a ledge or roll. Then once you get down to the ground floor, you can look back up and see all that ground you traversed above you. So your progress feels tangible, and you can plan how you want to fight the guys down below. That same feeling of anticipation and payoff continues in this part, where you have to climb and avoid these laser tripwires. It's a good early game challenge because you're allowed to hit one or two of them without failing, so you can come back later for a high score when you want to push yourself. There's several puzzles using the same format, but much like the Tomb Raider reboot games, all the engaging puzzle platforming was relegated to hidden side areas to prevent casual players from getting scared. Chapter 6 is the peak of the level art. You have to climb up this whole building and destroy it by crashing this giant thing inspired by the Taipei 101 skyscraper. There's no gimmicks unique to this level, just another sneaky tutorial segment about reverse wall jumps. Also, there's zero combat. What this level has that so many others are missing is lines of sight. All the openings in the scaffolding let you anticipate what's coming up and get ready to execute your next move. And the satisfaction of climbing pays off with a big slide that feels just as thrilling as the iconic rooftop from the first game, and then a quick descent to cap off the experience. They reuse the construction site theme a few chapters later with new additions. These mesh coverings look great in this light, and the level swaps the straight verticality of the tower for a more round structure. It's a simpler level where you can mostly run straight ahead, but the danger of the gunfire makes the key jumps feel intense. Then you get this, the single best view in the game, and unlike many of them, you actually can go there. The level drops you right off in this playground of fun new props, and that crane shot made me excited to free run with no objective like I hadn't been doing for the last few hours. I mentioned the art museum chapter at the beginning, but now that you've seen more levels and everything they can do with the lighting system, isn't it incredible restraint for them to set just this one piece at sunset? Having this one extra shiny, polished location bathed in the golden hour makes it all that more special. It's tempting to argue that cutting the filler missions and polishing the levels more would have made this game perfect, but I think DICE really bet everything on the immersive quality of the art and tried to make the engine do a combat system it wasn't built for. Even if the NPCs were perfectly tuned to match your combat moves, it would still be a chore to chase them all down while getting shot at in these massive open levels. In hindsight, it makes sense that all the first-person movement games I've enjoyed in the years since have greatly downplayed the combat in favor of more complex platforming. I already mentioned Superhot. In Momentum is this little indie game from 2012 that's 100% platforming. Shattered Steel leans more into the gunplay with tons of flashy moves. Neon White uses more of a combo system. And finally there's Motor Slice, which just came out as I'm recording. I'm excited to try it. Hopefully it lives up to my expectations. The developer explicitly referenced Mirror's Edge in some of their marketing, so we have to see how that pans out. If we collectively support these games, maybe DICE will get another chance to indulge themselves. Apparently they get one of these for every 5 EA shooter sequels. And if you enjoyed, you can support me by mashing any of these buttons down below.